Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Middle and I'm a third year PhD student at the Open University. My research looks at the use and production of linked data by ancient world researchers to see where linked data resources, tools and technologies might be best integrated with their existing research methods. This has involved looking at those researchers' digital habits more broadly, which has included multiple comments about their experiences of reusing ancient world data in a variety of formats, much of which is archaeological. To start off with, I'll give a brief overview of my research methodology, which incorporated a survey followed by a series of interviews. I'll then look at my findings relating to data reuse with respect to three key themes I identified from user comments: accuracy, open standards, and documentation. For each theme, I'll give a short wish list of characteristics that participants would like to see, as well as giving a more detailed example of a particular user's story. I'll end by summarising how archaeological data and ancient world data more broadly might be optimised for reuse. My research started with a survey which took place in spring 2018 and received 212 responses. I aimed the survey at ancient world researchers in a broad sense, which included archaeologists and historians, as well as language and literature specialists. All participants had an interest in using digital tools and resources in their research, but there was a huge range of skill levels and experiences, ranging from those whose digital activities were limited to online literature searches to those with expertise in digital resource production. As I'm particularly interested in research methods and linked data, I also included more specific questions on these topics. I asked survey participants if they were also happy to take part in a follow-up interview to discuss their responses in more detail. These took place between autumn 2018 and spring 2019 with a sample of 16 participants. I made sure to include participants with a range of digital experience and skill levels while being broadly demographically representative of the survey population as a whole. Many participants spoke about their experiences of reusing other people's data, and a lot of their comments fall under the themes of data accuracy, making the data available using open standards, and providing information about the data. So I'll go through each of these themes in more detail. Our first theme is accuracy, which includes a series of measures that users would like to take place to ensure that data is correct and up to date. Firstly, users would like data to be consistent. The example given here refers to numismatic data, which Elton mentioned earlier on, and I'll be giving several numismatic examples in my part of the talk. To provide a bit more context, this first participant is talking about an example where an institution has released multiple similar databases, but where these databases have differences in their structure and terminology that make it difficult to compare them. This situation is fairly common. Different databases are produced at different times by different people, and development tools and techniques evolve over time. There's unlikely to be sufficient time or resources for the institution to change the databases themselves, so a smaller scale solution might be to produce a schema that describes the relationships between the different fields. Databases could then be at least partially mapped to each other, potentially using a linked data approach. Secondly, some users would like to be assured that the datasets they're using are complete, with the participant in this example describing incomplete datasets as hazardous. Now, different people have different views on this. In many cases, as I'm sure you're aware, it's really difficult to establish a point where your dataset can be reliably described as complete. Also, new evidence or interpretation methods appear over time, which means that your dataset will most likely need updating in order to prevent the spread of false information. So recommending that all datasets must be complete before being shared online would be a bit ridiculous, but I thought it was important to include this example here to demonstrate user perceptions of incomplete data. What we can do to alleviate these concerns is to make sure that such datasets include appropriate information about when they were last updated, as well as whether they are still being worked on. And I'll return to this topic later on. Our other two items on the accuracy wish list are maintenance and validation, which are both measures that can be taken to ensure the accuracy of archaeological datasets. Maintenance refers to ensuring that the dataset is continuously updated over time as new information or corrections come in, which goes back to our completeness example on the previous slide. Validation refers to having some kind of external approval mechanism to allow users to add new data, perhaps via an expert review panel. Information about this process should be made available to all potential contributors, as well as users who are seeking reassurance of the data's authority. Throughout my research, the topic of authority came up as being particularly important for data being used in an academic context. In our final accuracy example, we have a user story that takes us from comments made in the survey to a more detailed discussion in the interview, and I've included some excerpts here. The participant, a numismatic specialist, so coins again, uses data from the American Numismatic Society databases, with CRO being Coinage of the Roman Republic Online and RRCH being Roman Republican coin hoards, released online as coin hoards of the Roman Republic. The information in these databases is based on authoritative print publications in the field by Crawford in the 1970s. In many ways, this is a great idea because it demonstrates the academic authority some researchers need before even entertaining the idea of using digital resources. However, this expert user states that some of the information in these books is out of date and that the dataset has not been updated to reflect this or to caution potential users that there may be inaccuracies. This is a problem because non-specialists may take the database's authority at face value and perpetuate these issues. Rather than simply dismiss the dataset and move on, the user wanted to solve this problem by sharing their knowledge and attempted to contact the dataset owners with a list of corrections, but they never heard back. This goes back to the point in my previous slide about validation of user contributions to a dataset. Providing a review mechanism for external contributions can help to maintain data quality over time, while allowing an expert user community to feel invested in the future of the dataset. This is particularly important where the original institution does not have the time or resources to continuously update the data. Our next key theme is releasing data using open standards and formats to ensure that anyone can reuse it without having to purchase software subscriptions or be restricted by the options available in a search interface. I should also add that open standards promote sustainability by ensuring that data can still be used even if the software used to produce it no longer exists. The first example is export. So simply put, users need to be able to get data out of your system and onto theirs in a format that they can then plug in elsewhere. Some examples that participant 120 gives are CSV or XML. Participant 109 here says that if users can't do this with the data, then there isn't any point in sharing it in the first place. And to expand on this, sharing data only in non-open proprietary formats greatly limits the number of people who can potentially use it, both in terms of their subject area and their financial status. This then limits the number of potential uses for the data, which could prevent innovative and/or interdisciplinary research from taking place. The next example concerns integration, which is summarised in our first quote from participant 81. I also touched upon this in the previous slide. Users want to be able to plug data into software and tools of their choosing without having to adapt it unless they choose to. Participant 54 goes into a bit more detail by stating that they use existing tools or their own code to analyse the data, with visualisation being an example. Our user story for open standards relates to a participant whose project used linked data techniques to connect various existing datasets, which are available online in a variety of formats. This participant stated that they, rather understandably, found datasets more difficult to incorporate if they did not adhere to linked data standards. Obviously, this is a particular problem for a linked data project, but it also demonstrates the advantages that using linked open data standards can provide in terms of facilitating data reuse. A related issue that the participant mentions in the second quote is the importance of using standard, openly available ontologies to describe entities and relationships, as this automatically provides a means of connecting one dataset to others that uses the same ontology terms. Obviously, as the participant states, this isn't always possible, and they ended up having to create their own ontology for specific terms relating to their research question. However, Using standard ontologies for referring to more general terms still provides a means for some of the data to be readily linked to other datasets, while ensuring accurate description of terms for which no established standard already exists. Our final theme concerns information about the data, which relates to the previous themes in terms of communicating to potential users about the data's accuracy, as well as the incorporation of open standards. This type of information should be included as part of the metadata about a dataset, and this is reflected in the example user comments. So, our combined metadata wish list from these examples would include describing what is and isn't included in the dataset. So, as well as information about content, which is crucial, it should also describe the standards, formats, and ontologies used. This ensures that potential users can make an informed choice about whether or not the data will be useful to them, as well as making sure that they're aware of any potential issues in terms of accuracy or completeness. Potential users should also be made aware of where the data comes from. So, who created the dataset and when, any primary or secondary sources that were used to produce it, and the date and nature of any updates that have been made since it was originally published. Some other requests from participants included providing citation instructions. This type of comment was really common among users with relatively low confidence in their digital abilities, and goes back to my previous point about the importance of conveying some kind of academic authority. These users want reassurance that they're using trustworthy data, and knowing that they can cite it in their scholarship is very important to them. As well as having, say, an example citation in the first place, other users mention that they would like to have a short and meaningful URL to refer to the data for ease of citation in print publications. The second comment on this slide refers more specifically to datasets that are provided as part of a wider resource, and asks for tutorials and use cases to help them get the most out of the data. Including this kind of information can help to increase the potential user base for the data, making it more useful for more people. Doing this effectively can require a significant time investment, so it should ideally be built into the timescales for the project to produce the data or the accompanying resource, rather than being more of an afterthought towards the end. Finally, our user story demonstrates the importance that information about data remains clear and up to date. In this example, the participants struggled to use data from the Pleiades Gazetteer because they found the documentation difficult to understand, with some of it also being out of date. One potential solution to this could be for dataset creators to run their documentation past people who are unfamiliar with the data, as when you're really close to a project, it's very easy to assume that everything you've written about it makes sense. Also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, any changes that have been made to the dataset should be communicated clearly to potential users. If this documentation is extensive and frequently updated, its structure should also be reviewed occasionally to ensure that information about the data is easy to find. All this ensures that potential users are effectively informed about the dataset, any potential accuracy issues, and its implementation of new or existing standards. From examples given in this presentation, I can conclude the following. Firstly, potential users need to be able to determine that datasets come from a trustworthy source, with their expectations managed with regard to any potential gaps or errors. This allows them to make an informed decision about whether or not to proceed, and gives them the confidence to cite the data in a scholarly publication. Secondly, potential users would like to perform operations on data without spending significant time or money, which may prohibit some people from reusing the data at all. The best way to facilitate this process is to publish data using established open standards, even if it is additionally available in a proprietary format or via a user interface. Thirdly, and most importantly, communicating with the user by providing clear and current information about an archaeological dataset is key to facilitating its reuse and has important implications for the other two themes I've discussed, accuracy and open standards. Thank you.